there are all sorts of different responses to conflict, and in certain circumstances, it's not like one approach is universally recommended. Sometimes avoiding a conflict in a given circumstance or context is the right way to go. But oftentimes avoidance, I think, is often how a lot of people deal with conflict and just don't ever want to deal with it. And there's missed opportunity to grow, but there's also, just you unfortunately can steer a ship into more dysfunction, the ship of an organization in more dysfunction when, whether it's the people at the C-suite, whether it's the mid-level executives, what's the staff at any whatever level, the better everyone learns how to deal with conflict and engage in it and work through it, the much healthier organizations tend to be.
Hey, welcome listeners. Today I have the distinct honor and privilege of having a great friend and attorney on the show today, but he's much more than an attorney. I wanted to invite him on because he's really an entrepreneur in so many ways. He has his hand in a lot of cookie jars, and I'm going to let him get into those details. But I've got John Napier here. He's of counsel, an attorney at Hangar Law. He's a co-director of PAX Napier with his wife, Corrie. And he also has a real estate holdings company he's been building and developing here for some time. So, John, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah. So that was a mouthful, for me. So if you can kind of why don't you go in a little depth about all that? Because you've got a lot going on, man.
Sure. I'll try not to go back to the very, very beginning of my infancy here, but yeah, I've been an attorney now for, I guess, 14 years. Got out of law school in 2009. Have had the privilege of working with my dear friend Hunter Hangar and many other colleagues and friends at Hangar Law, and they're in Virginia Beach and in Newport News. I've been with them for the past 7.5 years. I went of counsel with them last year, which means essentially that I'm still associated and part of the law firm, just not there quite as much on the day-to-day. Still definitely have clients and people I help, and which is fantastic. I love that firm a lot and the people there. But I also have a consultancy, as you mentioned, a consultancy and mediation firm with my wife, Corrie. That firm focuses predominantly on conflict resolution. She and I are both mediators. She's not an attorney, but she's a mediator. I'm also a mediator, trained a mediator. And we have various experiences and areas of expertise in that. And Corrie also does a lot of training for companies. I mean, she trains staff, C-suite executives, and everyone everywhere in between in organizations, be they nonprofits, major universities, Fortune 500 companies, smaller local businesses. And she teaches a lot on and trains a lot on communication styles and how to have difficult conversations, and just how to properly. We both work to find ways to properly manage conflict, because conflict is inevitable in life. It's really what you do with it. Conflict isn't the boogeyman, or the big bad wolf. It's actually how you handle it and how you manage it. And conflict can be helpful in refining what you do and how you do it, and really helping you grow. And then also, I've been in and around real estate for the last 20 plus years. Actually, it's 21 years now. Even before I was an attorney, before I went to law school, I worked for a large real estate development company in the Hampton Roads area, and then went to law school, continued that trend, and have continued in real estate, both in the legal side and in the business side ever since. So hopefully that's succinct for you.
Well, it's definitely succinct because there's a lot more in every one of those areas. I think that the comment you made that conflict is not the boogeyman. I mean, I think about conflict, and my wife and I actually talk about this a lot, that, most people have quite the aversion to conflict, right? And it seems like today, in today's world, we're even less willing to to have conflict and challenge people, each other, ourselves. And, as we look back in days gone by, it seemed like it was really healthy. And if you watch like we like to watch old movies and old TV, and you see a lot of direct conflict, and you just
Hmm.
don't see it today anymore. And I don't think it's healthy. And I'm by no means an expert. You guys are the experts, and I don't particularly like it, but I'll deal with it. But pretty fascinating that it seems like a really timely place to be from a business standpoint.
Yeah, things have gone well in the regard of, there's never going to be a lack of conflict in that sense. And really the goal isn't to, it's people talk about treating the symptom versus trying to cure the disease, if you will, as a metaphor. And often what Corrie and I are doing is we want to be able to, help people get good tools in how to, really healthily navigate and manage conflict that comes up, because like I said, conflict is inevitable, and you can hit it head on, you can avoid it. There are all sorts of different responses to conflict. And honestly, we want people to be able to have the tools to healthily manage that when it comes up, because like I said, it's unavoidable. And sometimes, there are all sorts of different responses to conflict, and in certain circumstances, it's not like one approach is universally recommended. Sometimes avoiding a conflict in a given circumstance or context is the right way to go. But oftentimes avoidance, I think, is often how a lot of people deal with conflict and just don't ever want to deal with it. And there's missed opportunity to grow, but there's also, just you unfortunately can steer a ship into more dysfunction, the ship of an organization to more dysfunction when, whether it's people at the C-suite, whether it's the mid-level executives, what's the staff at any whatever level, the better everyone learns how to deal with conflict and engage in it and work through it, the much healthier organizations tend to be. And so it's not often talked about, funny enough, in the broader, broader context of the public. But I think once people think, oh, I don't have to deal with a ton of passive aggression or be passive aggressive, or I don't have to, just have to be this bulldog that's always just like going to punch someone in the nose if they challenge me, or I don't have to be the shrinking violet and just, scurry away every time someone starts, where conflict starts rearing its head. So again, and we work with clients all over the U.S. and we work with some international clients as well. And yeah, it's conflict is really universal in many respects. There's no lack of it. It again can manifest slightly differently in different cultures, obviously, but there's still a very, very common underlying human thread to it, no matter where we're doing work. So.
Right. That's really interesting. I remember, 15 years ago now, someone introduced me to the book. Pat Lencioni wrote a book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And I used to think that you wanted all of your key leaders together on the same sheet of music. And his approach was, no, you want to air your grievances, so to speak. And everyone has a different perspective, and you want to encourage that. And through that, I guess, conflict, you come up to, you make better decisions than everyone just signing off.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a proverb out there that says iron like iron sharpens iron, is part of the proverb. And that concept that it's the friction between very strong, two very strong things that ends up refining something and making it sharper and making it more durable. And if you don't have resistance, you don't gain muscle. There's a very well-used metaphor out there in nature that I know of where, with the caterpillar goes into the chrysalis and then becomes the butterfly. And, people can say, it's struggling out of the cocoon. Let me, just help it. Let me help it. Let me cut open the cocoon. And what people don't realize is the butterfly develops the muscles that it needs to fly through this struggle out of the cocoon and out of the chrysalis. And if it doesn't do that, it can't be what it's supposed to be. Right. So that's one of those really amazing and pretty well used metaphors in nature. But that struggle and that struggle that the butterfly has to take and really push itself through is what allows it to keep functioning. And so anyway, that's there's a lot of different things we could talk about that necessarily, but I mean, yeah, it's fascinating work, and my wife has been leading the charge because I'm, even that with the real estate and the law side of things for me, I haven't been quite as full time into that, even though I've definitely been functioning in that space for quite some time. So
Right. Right. Well, I mean, I think it's totally appropriate though for our listeners. We have, business owners, entrepreneurs, and if one thing I've learned in all these years of owning businesses, having some successes, having some failures, is that, I mean, we're really the limit on how far we can go, right? And so
mhm.
much of that is avoiding things like the conflict and not want to address, the elephant in the room kind of thing. And everyone knows the elephant's there, right? And the big leader, doesn't want to go there, and it's detrimental to success. And I can look back at my own history and see those experiences and say, wow, if I would have had somebody that could have interceded at that point and said, hey,
Mhm.
let's reevaluate how we're approaching this, right? And it's
Oh
not
yeah.
bad.
Right. Yep. Yeah, and that's part of what we do as well. My wife Corrie predominantly at this point, but she's also an executive coach. But then she does conflict coaching. So if someone has a
Mhm.
specific conflict that they're dealing with, she can coach them through that, or either one of us can step in to mediate an existing conflict
Right.
in between parties as a third party neutral. And so it's just amazing how having that sounding board and having someone that can help you really see it from a more objective perspective can really completely shift the dynamic of what's going on for yourself internally. And then
Mhm.
also when you have a third party neutral that's sitting in between, just say two parties are in conflict, just to ask questions and to really help, because mediation is a voluntary process, right? People aren't forced into mediation,
Right.
right? It's not like court, right?
Mhm.
But if you can get the parties to communicate, and my wife is absolutely brilliant at this, but get the parties to communicate so that they hear each other, and it can feel like a really slow as molasses kind of process. But forcing the parties, and I say forcing in air quotes, not actually, but taking the parties through a process where they have to communicate and they have to reflect back and they have to be able to hear and communicate with one another so that they really truly understand each other. I mean, this is not a scientific or a statistic, but the vast majority of the conflict just happens through communication. I can't tell you as an attorney where I've seen clients that I know personally are incredibly trustworthy on both sides, of a situation. Incredibly trustworthy, have all the integrity in the world, made an agreement on business, and they didn't document it right, maybe didn't communicate it right, and then they got in conflict. And it wasn't because one person lied.
Right.
It was just it was literally a misunderstanding between the parties as to what the arrangement was.
Mm.
And when there's not clarity on that up front, when a conflict arises, that's when things can really unfortunately get messy, and then
Right.
people they can lose trust in each other, and it's not even because either side was being dishonest. It was just
Right.
because they didn't communicate properly and really necessarily maybe document what it was, clearly document what they were trying to do.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's what a shame. What a waste of energy and resources and opportunity, right? In
Yeah,
situations like that.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Well, shifting gears a little bit to your real estate experience and your other
Mhm.
entrepreneurial ventures. I know that we were talking the other day about a really interesting project that you're working on, and maybe you'll lead in a little bit to sort of your interest in real estate, how that's developed and whatnot. But I really want to talk about this because to me that's like the epitome of an entrepreneur. That this experience with this new business and piece of real estate and all that. So start wherever you feel comfortable in this whole process because it's just really super
Sure.
fascinating.
Yeah, I'm. You're referencing the coffee shop that I'm opening in a commercial building inside of a real estate deal. So several years ago, I was looking at this one area in Hampton Roads, and I just thought that there was some good opportunity there. It was about 2 years ago now. Was negotiating purchasing out the last just about 30 years left on a 100-year land lease on a larger commercial property, and it was a large acre, between 15 and 20 acres, with multiple commercial buildings on it. A very unusual land lease situation, because land leases aren't all that common in our area here. They are very common in other areas of the country, but they're not unheard of. But usually it tends to be one building or a small complex, or one more contained, and this was a really different situation. So one of the buildings, and it has existing tenants, and one of the buildings, the tenant ended up vacating at the end of their lease. So I was working to figure out what I was going to do with it. I was negotiating with one tenant, and that didn't end up working out. And so I ended up showing a good friend of mine, a guy named David Spring. I was just showing him some of the things I was doing. So I showed him this space, and he looked at this building that had been vacated, and he said, "What are you doing with this building?" I was like, "Well, I'm not sure at this moment. Had a tenant, then that didn't work out." He's like, "Let's start a coffee shop." I said, "Okay." And he said, about a year ago, I bought, I think it was about a year ago, and this is in the spring of this year. He's like, "I bought out all of this material, including this industrial roaster, from a defunct commercial coffee business up in Northern Virginia. Got it for, next to nothing. And then this estate sale." He's like, let's start a coffee shop. We can roast our own beans. Maybe we'll roast for other people. Maybe we won't, but let's set it up and start a coffee shop and start doing some roasting. And I said, I literally, within 5 minutes of him suggesting it, I said, "Here's the key to the building. Let's get it started." And that was it. And that was in April of this year. So now we're taping at the very beginning of September. And so we spent the last several months getting the building together, doing some rehab, a lot of rehab needed. And then, just working with the city. And it's always a process to go through the city to get the permits that you need and the inspections and everything. And so we're continuing to work through all of that. And we'll hopefully be opening. This is, maybe by the time this gets aired, I hope we'll be open. And it's up in Hampton, Virginia. And yeah, we're excited. We're calling it Buckrow Coffee Co. because it's right outside of Buckrow Beach in Hampton. So yeah, we're really excited about that. And that's a really, one of those situations that was just pretty amazing, and how it all just kind of came together, because David was a friend, and he and I have been getting to know each other, and he's a very accomplished entrepreneur. He's a veteran. He'd done some special forces stuff for the Air Force, and also had a ton of experience in real estate investment and everything, and just incredible visionary and entrepreneurial guy. I highly recommend him for for this time as well, if you can get him as a guest. Yeah. So I'm really excited about that, but it's still playing itself out. But it's one of those things where it's a stacked kind of entrepreneurial endeavor, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Well, the interesting thing is that you to me is that you just entrepreneurs sort of make it up as they go a little bit. You go with your gut, you go with your instinct, and so your friend David bought the coffee equipment just kind of on a whim, right? He's like, "This at some point I can maybe use this or do something with it."
Yeah. He was just like, "This is a great deal. Maybe I can sell this and make some money, or maybe I can." I don't know if he had envisioned starting his own coffee company at when he initially bought it, or whether he just saw an opportunity to, buy some good equipment and potentially resell it. But at the end of the day, I think the longer he had it, I think the more interested he was in actually starting something with it, which was exciting. And then it was very, very fortuitous that we ended up, touring around things. And he saw the building. He was like, we can do this. I was like, okay, great. He had a vision that I didn't have. So.
But you had the vision to recognize this opportunity with the buildings and the 100-year land lease with 30 years left on it, that you could turn this into something. I know you're renting the buildings originally, but just the fact that you took that, that foresight. Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is about it, actually, I saw this and I said, I think there's an enormous opportunity here. Even if I just if I were to just play out the clock on the last, again, almost 30 years of this thing, there was potential in the property in and of itself, but looking even broader than that, just establishing good communication lines with the underlying landowners and just having some, I'm working on some broader vision for the property, and I've had a broader vision for the property itself, and that it could be a lot more than it is now, even. So there's definitely some potential redevelopment opportunity there on the long term. And, there's a lot of other things. And it's also the most, of course, it's probably one of the most complicated land deals I've ever seen. And I had to jump right into the middle of it. So, because it's, you've got landowners, you've got a land lease, then you've got some subleases and sub-subleases and sub-subleases. And it's just, it can feel like you're playing 4-level chess in essence, but it's exciting. I mean, it's exciting, and it's a good opportunity in many regards. So, yeah.
Well, that's and you. So all of your legal training and legal experience really came into play and to bear in this particular transaction, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's still definitely still playing out, and I never pretend like I know everything by any stretch. Sure. But it's one of those situations too where even again, I know a lot of really very smart real estate investors and developers and entrepreneurs and everything, but it's a incredibly outside the box kind of situation. And so, I have one friend who said it, and I don't think they came up with this saying necessarily, but where inside the difficulty lies the opportunity, to kind of paraphrase it. And so I think that's just another aspect of this where, you see something and some things just aren't a good deal no matter how you slice it. Right. But sometimes it's a pretty incredible what you can find out there where you just get that one little shift in perspective. It could be something that's out there on LoopNet, on the commercial real estate listing, and someone says, okay, this thing's been on here for like 3 years. This is not going anywhere. And someone just has that idea, that spark, or that perspective, say, you know what, this actually could be used in this way. And then they come in and often can get a good deal, especially if it's been on the market for a long time, can get a good deal on it, and then just completely revitalize the property and just have this vision far beyond. And it was just took a different perspective and some creative thinking.
Well, that's so interesting, because I mean, in the difficulty lies the opportunity. And so many people, they hit a ceiling, and so many people that go into business for themselves, they don't realize that there are going to be walls along the way and hurdles and, things you have to overcome. And, you have to get creative, right? You have to think outside of the box. And I think that would you say you're a pretty optimistic guy? You really kind of look for the solution, not at the problem in life?
Yeah, it's a funny question for me, because I'm an attorney as well. And attorneys are kind of by nature are geared to look towards the problems, and they're geared to think about what can go wrong and help their clients do whatever they can to mitigate and to control the circumstances as best they can, and to be forward thinking on all of the pitfalls and all of the ways things can really just go south. Right. And so I do have, I can have that perspective as an attorney who's, been an attorney for more than a little while now,
and has seen a lot of that things go sideways.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. But I also, one of the things that I love about what I've been doing in the practice of law is I've been on the business side of things, right? Before I was ever in, because predominantly my area of law practice is in real estate and business transactions. I'm not really a litigator, but because I had seen things from the business side, I've got clients that come in and just say, we like that you're thinking on this business level, and not just, a fairly common complaint is that lawyers will over lawyer a deal. They'll go chase commas. Two attorneys will rack up a huge bill on a clause, and every clause has a purpose, and every agreement, right? But they'll rack up a couple $1,000 bill going back and forth arguing about a clause and about some minutia in a clause, which doesn't have as much business relevance to a client. And the lawyers are thinking, well, what if this happens, and you make sure this clause is as good as you can have it. And there's some validity to that, but there's also a balance, to saying, what are the needs of the client, and what are those needs met? Because lawyers can be deal killers. They can be. They don't have to be, but sometimes, they over lawyer a deal, or they think about they think of all the ways this can go wrong, and just keep shooting all the holes into a deal. And so I'm thankful to your question. I'm thankful that I have an entrepreneurial mindset in many regards, and how that can come into play on the legal side, but also for my own projects. It tends to, I hope I'm not overly optimistic. I'm grounded, and I can, take some necessary precautions, but also not just think about only the ways things can go wrong, because then I would probably never do any deals of any kind.
You would never get out of the starting blocks if that were the case. I mean,
right.
Most entrepreneurs err way on the other side, right? Of everything always works out for me every time, and nothing can go wrong here, right? Why do I need an attorney? Why do I need somebody else's opinion? But I've learned, and that you need somebody in your life, even you, when you're putting on your own business cap. I would imagine maybe it's Corrie, maybe I don't know who it is that is your sounding board to say, hey, check me here, right? A little bit. Am I missing something that's glaringly obvious because I'm so excited about this deal?
Yeah, absolutely. We all need the sounding boards, and we all need the people who are willing to give us, genuine, service-oriented pushback, if you will, right? They're not pushing back so that they can go snake the deal. They're not pushing back because they're just pessimistic. They're not pushing back because they think you're, crazy. They may think you're crazy, but they're pushing back. I mean, you might, I don't know, who knows? It depends on the situation, right? Yeah. But I mean, if just to say, hey, like, let's dig into this. Let's really make sure that, have you thought this through? Have you thought about these contingencies, this potential eventuality? I had one of my closest friends and mentors for a long time just told me, he's like, John, you always got to have a backup of the backup. That's never left my mind. He's like, you have a backup plan. That's great. But what's the backup of the backup? Like, you got to think through, through. It's not just, again, he was always saying, he's like, I don't play one, even two moves ahead. I'm trying to look 4, 5, 6 moves ahead on the board, and make sure that things are lining up that way. And so that can get exhausting, but having those people in your life is really important, really good advisors and friends and mentors and people who can ask you the hard questions, and really challenge you, because, it's never smooth sailing, and we all have blind spots. We all have blind spots, and that's just the way it is. And that's why you can hire a good attorney, or that's why you can have a good consultant, when you also have close people that you can trust, that are not just trying to, that are not necessarily on your payroll either, that can hopefully, who can look at you and say, have you thought about this? Or why do you think this is a good deal? Or why are you going in this direction with that? Have you considered, B path or C path or D path here, to look at other options, and even give you a broader perspective than you're considering in the moment.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And not necessarily those people outside of the paid professionals that you definitely need, that are trusted, but the non-paid, not necessarily people that are your close family or friends or whatnot. Some of that is important because they might know you, but sometimes they have a limited vision as well. So I found that you have people in different disciplines that you have developed relationships with, maybe mentors or whatnot, that can speak into your life and really
Absolutely
guide you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's not just those close to you, because they can want to cheer you on, and that can sometimes mitigate their perspective about things too, but it can be someone who is a little more disinterested, that you trust, but you may not be as close with, who can really just say, well, why are you going about it that way? I've done that. I've tried it. And unless you can tell me a different fact in your scenario, this is how it's going to end up. You know what I mean? Not with 100% certainty, but I've been on that path. I've been down that road. I know how that's going to go. And you may want to consider, maybe that's a good road to go down, but make sure you take this tool with you, or maybe you take this person with you, or maybe you got to be aware of these circumstances or these scenarios that can come up, which you wouldn't expect. And I didn't expect when I went through it, but I can tell you, like, you got to be willing to look ahead, and that kind of objectivity and foresight is just incredibly invaluable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, someone said experience is the best teacher, but then someone a little wiser said someone else's experience is even a better teacher, right?
Yeah.
Than your own, because it costs you money, time, frustration, pain, and at the end of the day, you're never going to eliminate all the potential downsides of something and maybe bad experiences, but you can, as you said, mitigate a lot of it with good counsel and mentorship. And
risk is inevitable. I mean, risk and entrepreneurship are synonymous, right? You're not going to get, if it's not risky, it's not entrepreneurial, I would say. Right. I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to think of an example. Again, one of the things I do as a lawyer all the time is try to think of exceptions to the rule, and then the exceptions to the exceptions. It's how they teach you in law school. Obviously, there's like, here's the rule, and here's the exception to the rule, and then here's the exception to the exception. But I think baked into entrepreneurship, there is risk inherently. And if you're not taking risk, I'm not sure you're doing something entrepreneurial really by nature. Someone might be able to come up with a good example or prove me wrong on that, but I certainly can't think of one now. I don't know if you have any.
I don't know, John. I have no examples. I would say, and if there's no risk, where's the fun in it, right? That's what keeps you alive every day. It's a new moment, and you have these high highs and low lows, and sometimes it's like this, but there's never a dull moment, right? When you're an entrepreneur.
That's true.
I just think you're really living. I say, I tell people, whether you're you're a Christian or a Hindu, or you have a faith or whatever, I believe that entrepreneurship will teach you faith like nothing else, because you're into the unknown, right? I mean, sometimes every day, maybe every hour, you're in the unknown, and you have to trust in something. And I think it's just an amazing proving ground for that. I know it has been for me, but
I couldn't agree with you more. I think every single human being lives with faith in something, right? You have to trust something outside of yourself, because none of us have the ability to control everything at any point. And so you're always having to trust something and have faith in something, right? Something out there to be able to keep moving forward, and then it just becomes a question of what's your faith in. So,
right. Yep. Absolutely. John, this has been awesome. We actually are actually over our time.
Oh, wow. Oh,
yeah. It goes fast, man. It's like,
it does. This
has been awesome. We can go another 30 minutes.
Yeah.
How can people get up with you for, maybe they need business advice, real estate advice, or mediation? This goes all over the country. So, I mean, it could be somebody in Kansas that has a business and they're partners and they're trying to figure out how to work together.
Yeah, my wife and I are all over the country. And like I said, even we have international clients that we work on the consultancy and the mediation side. That's just PAX Napier, PAXNAPIER.com, www.paxnapier.com. We have our website for that. And then on the law side, obviously in Virginia, I'm barred in Virginia. And so that's Hangar Law, HANGERLAW.com. HangarLaw.com. And then obviously I'm on LinkedIn. Corrie is on LinkedIn as well, and people can find us there. And so we're not hiding for sure.
Well, beautiful. We're going to get into show notes and get this one out. I think this has been just a fantastic conversation, and I've really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, Paul. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, awesome. Well, have just an amazing day, John.
Thanks so much. You too.
Hey, gang, just winding down here today. Thanks for listening to the show. And as always, if you need capital to grow your business, you're looking to purchase commercial real estate or build a building or invest in commercial real estate, or you're looking to acquire a business or a competitor, or just need growth capital, we'd love to talk to you. We fund businesses all day long. Our mission is to help entrepreneurs win and to fund their businesses and fund their dreams so that they can make an impact in their community. Reach out to me today. Go to our website, click the button to schedule a 20-minute conversation, discovery call. We'll have a quick conversation, see if there's a need, see if there's a fit, and we can take it from there. The website is VPC, Victor Paul Charlie .capital. That's VPC.capital. All right, there's no .com on that. It's VPC.capital. As always, keep crushing it and hope to see you soon around here. Take care.